Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, January 31st, 2025, and today we're doing the Feedback Friday thing. We'll get a Patreon question about fertilizing transplants organically, and also talk late winter cover cropping, so let's do it. All right, well, Friday is here, and the next time you see me, it will be February. That's fun. It is rainy as all get out here in Kentucky today, but I'm thankful for the lack of mud season while it lasted. It's going to be in the 60s several times over the next few days, so I can sense some soccer in the forecast, and I hope you all have equally fun plans for the weekend. So before we get into our Feedback Friday, this week I got a message from my German publisher that my book will officially be out in German next week, so that's very exciting. I really like this publisher too. They've been incredibly thorough and the design is awesome. So if you have any German friends out there, let them know about it. That would be rad. The Living Soil Handbook will also, it is out in French and it will soon be out in Italian. All the links for that in the show notes. All right, so it is indeed Feedback Friday where we dive into your comments and thoughts from the week. So let's get into it. On Monday, we discussed slugs and how a massive change in the environment can take a while to balance out. At South Bay Sunshine, gave a good example of this, quote, "So true about the ecological change when putting in a new no-till garden. When I changed my entire landscape to a no-till garden, the first year was infested with pill bugs and earwigs, especially in the mulch. 5 years later, they're still here, but not an issue," end quote. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Think of it like this. Pill bugs love mulch, but there wasn't a lot of mulch there before. So suddenly they find a huge new food source and the populations explode. Meanwhile, the predators of pill bugs were not there before in great numbers because there weren't a lot of pill bugs. Now that there are, the populations of those predators explode, and so on until the ecology eventually finds some sort of equilibrium. Is it annoying? It certainly can be, but if you quote-unquote treat the pest, you can't expect the predators to ever come. Also notably, wasps and spiders and millipedes, etc. are all predators of pill bugs, so don't spray or treat the predators either. Otherwise, that's where the pest issues come from. Lots of interesting comments all over that one. It's frankly hard to ever just pick one or two for this Friday feedback segment, and sometimes there are really interesting comments that I save for later topics. So if you're ever writing something you're really proud of or asking me kind of a different question, know that I see it and might bring it up later at a later date. So thank you for that. On Tuesday, we discussed hydroponics and got this gentle criticism from Catamaran Man 333, who wrote, quote, "I think you should try hydroponics yourself before you write hydroponic produce off as flavorless. I think a lot of larger scale hydroponic growers either skimp on the nutrients or they are allowed to fluctuate too much. In my limited experience, hydroponic tomatoes are just as flavorful as soil grown and with a thinner skin," end quote. So thanks. And I think this author of this comment meant that I should try to grow hydroponically myself. And sure, it's entirely possible that the hydroponic food I've tasted, and like I said in that episode, I've tasted a fair amount of hydroponic food from my many years cooking, but most of that has come primarily from larger scale growers, I'm sure. I'm certain there is a small scale hydroponic system that would create really good food. And like that commenter said, I've never really tried hydroponic growing myself. Not really. I've tried some microgreens and coconut coir once, which was fine, but not my thing. As others in the comments pointed out, hydroponics is kind of an ancient practice as well, and even helped sustain the Aztecs to some extent. Though I should say that the floating islands of the Chinampas were filled with soil dredged from the lake bottoms and such, so it's not exactly the same thing as the primarily soilless hydroponic systems we see today, but more on the Chinampas another time because that is really brilliant agriculture and certainly very interesting. A hybridized version with soil like that, I imagine, could make really, really excellent food. Nutritious, flavorful, all that stuff. So anyway, yeah, I'm a big fan of Don't Knock It Till You Rock It, but if I ever did a big hydro system, it would still have soil involved, which is kind of not exactly hydroponics. So there's that. On Wednesday, we talked about using weeds as cover crops, and I thought at Little Kai 1 summarized it nicely with, quote, "People need to remember that one of the reasons weeds are weeds is that they often have a life cycle concurrent with main crops. They aren't just plants that you can mow in the off season and call it good. Annual weeds germinate at the same time your crop is in the ground, smothering your transplants and robbing them of light, nutrients, and water. If they would just conveniently germinate in fall, grow nicely all winter, and winter kill, that'd be great. Unfortunately, that's not how they work. End quote. Yeah, thanks for the comment. Weeds are just not convenient enough plants to utilize. And I like this question from this one's really difficult. At Geladiblowen 2567, got that one right, I'm sure. Mentioned something in the same vein of, quote, "Hey Jesse, awesome show as always. While hearing you talk about weeds as cover crops, I thought, what is your thought on weeds as nutrient mobilizers, using weeds to balance and improve certain nutrient availability? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts," end quote. Yeah, great question. I mean, nothing against weeds. They can be better at the jobs we need done than some of the cover crops that we generally use, and not to mention some of the flavors of certain weeds are truly great. But I'm going to go with cover crops because I can control them better. Weeds are often really deep-rooted, hard to kill, without tillage, really vigorous. I just don't necessarily want them in my garden or to make a mistake and let them go to seed and be a problem for many years. Happy to have them stay out of the garden beds. Living pathways is fine. Around the farm's fine. Beds is kind of my space. And I'd rather do that and then figure out alternative ways to mobilize nutrients and improve the soil health, like cover crops. And on Thursday, we talked about peppers, and this from at Western Mo, No-Till Gardening, sparked something else I should say about these peppers. They wrote, quote, "I switched to bullhorn peppers a few years ago and love them because they're ready a lot sooner than the bell peppers," end quote. So yes, thank you. And that is also a thing, but I should say that what I do is that I harvest the first round of bell peppers really heavily as green peppers. Then the red bullhorns start to come in shortly thereafter, and that's when I ease up on harvesting the bells. Then eventually I can harvest green and red bell peppers plus red bullhorns all at once. I don't sell a lot of green bullhorns, so I only harvest those as red. I leave them 100% just to go red. Anyway, yeah, the green bells are the way to speed up that process on those slow pokes, so I think that's a nice way to utilize it. I'd also be remiss to not point out this correction from at C Triant, who wrote, quote, "Archaeologist here, we dig up people and their stuff, not dinosaurs. That would be paleontologist," end quote. Listen, I get what you're saying, but I don't feel like you can blame me on this one because someone just needs to tell those archaeologists to stay in their lane. Yeah, just saying. All right. Thanks as always for your insight, critiques, questions, and comments. Greatly appreciate you all. You are the best. All right. We will take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss keeping transplants looking happy and healthy throughout their lives. BRB.
It's true. Let me know. Just a same mistake. Every second comes and breaks. It's so weird. I let go.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Harnwah Greenhouses, leading the way in turnkey solutions for local growers. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's question comes from Patreon member Kyle Putnam, who writes, quote, "Following up on the discussion of transplants versus seeding, how do you fertilize transplants that have to sit around for a while? I've dug around various extension websites looking for a bit of better guidance on this, but the information out there is a bit anemic, like my longer waiting transplants. Also, following up on the comment about the revolution not happening behind a paywall, maybe in the world of mind-numbing AI, it does. Trying to look up anything horticultural these days involves having to scroll through endless derivative drivel. I'm increasingly happy to pay for real content. I'd be curious to see where the general population comes out on this, end quote. Okay, love it. Great question. And to the thought on paywalls first and AI, I don't disagree that the free information in the world is often highly derivative, meaning it's just people regurgitating what others have said. And then you have AI machines who not only cannot physically have any experience growing, but are also seeing those patterns and relaying them. And indeed, it's a mess out there, at least for the moment. Honestly, we hear people complain a lot that there is just so much info out there and so much of it conflicting info that it's just hard to get started. It's hard to know where to start, what to follow, who to follow, what will actually be helpful. And that's a bummer. So paying for quality information from someone that you know has experience and data to back up those systems that they use is definitely a more reliable resource if you can afford it. It's that if you can afford it qualifier that limits the quote unquote revolution. So it's my belief that people will get bad advice, certainly, but they will also get enough free advice that will lead to enough good experience where they can eventually identify the bad or at least unapplicable advice without trying it. With that ran out of the way, your other question about fertilizing transplants is somewhat easier than it sounds, provided you're using good, balanced soil mix and the plants are in reasonably favorable growing circumstances like a greenhouse. Your limiting factor is going to be, by and large, nitrogen. Choose a good nitrogen source like fish hydrolysate and follow the recommendations on the label. It's honestly as simple as that. You could really dial it in and all that, but unless you're running a large plant propagation house and selling plant starts, just keeping it simple is fine. I'll link the Neptune's Harvest one that we use in the show notes, though I should say it's an affiliate link, so, take that for what it's worth. I rarely have to use anything in the greenhouse, though, I should say. If you are using a good soil mix, like we use the till soil, but a good soil mix from a good trusted composter will work, you should not have huge issues with fertilizing. If I see yellowing in tomatoes, peppers, celery, eggplant, or one of the other crops that is in the soil for a really long time, that's when I will apply a little bit of a nitrogen fertilizer just to get them to the point of planting. As for the application itself, bottom watering is the best for large plants, or you can just use a watering can, but the bottom watering is going to be more efficient in terms of not losing a bunch of the product to it just dripping through the trays onto the ground. If you can set up a fertigation system in your greenhouse, that's cool too, but probably overkill for most people listening to the show. Perennials in pots are probably at least a slightly different story because of how long they are in the pots. And Blake from Peaceful Heritage Nursery talked about his fertigation system a bit in the video we did on his farm this past summer, so I will link that as well. Anyway, I hope all of that was at least a little bit helpful. It does not have to be complicated. A good soil mix and some reserve fish hydrolysate will get you really far. If you're seeing significant deficiencies, it's probably the soil mix or potentially your water source, but probably the soil mix. Great question and comment there, Kyle. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will discuss what cover crops you could be sowing towards the end of winter, if any. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruit, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join their mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL, all caps, one word, for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. All right, so I've had a couple questions come in recently about late winter cover cropping. Essentially, is there anything that I can sow right now for the spring? And the answer is maybe. First of all, and I will have to say this every time I mention any sort of cover crop management, cover crops can be great for soil or they can become a nightmare. So if you are heading out of the winter right now and have some soil to cover, you need to make sure you do not need those beds or that plot anytime before May or even June, depending on where you are. Don't sow something now and then want it gone in early April. For most of us in, let's say, zone 7 and above arbitrarily, it doesn't really work that way. As long as we're all on the same page about that, though, here are the options I recommend. First, I should say that someone might ask, why do you still have bare soil in January? And sometimes it's just a product of the previous crop holding the bed down, like a cold-tolerant brassica, for instance, or it's the product of carrots that aren't fully harvested until later in the season, like late December or January or something, or whatever, it happens. Anyway, there are two crops that stand out for me in terms of their relative ease to be killed, but also their relative ease in the sowing process. I don't think I could have said that in any more complicated of a way, but anyway, easy to kill, easy to sow. One would be Lacy Phacelia, a nice small seed, and Crimson Clover, also a nice small seed. These are two that can be sown right on the soil surface, which is, if it's dry enough, I would still recommend raking them in, but it's fine if not. And they will germinate and grow after a few weeks, even on relatively cold soil. So you don't necessarily have to bury those. They will not get as tall or put their roots down quite as deep as an overwintered cover crop, but they will hold the soil in place and provide some lovely spring flowers for insects and some nutrient mobilization. Peas are also a possibility, but the challenge with peas is that they basically scream for birds and rodents to come eat them. So it can be harder to establish like a pea cover crop at this time of year when food is so scarce for birds and rodents and that sort of stuff. And therefore, if they're eating patches of it, you're just going to get inconsistent germination. Another option is just food crops like spinach. Spinach germinates fairly well in cold weather and will survive the inevitably very cold temperatures that I know at least we will still face, even though we're looking at like 10 days in a row right now of like 50 degrees or more, which would be more like hoodie weather in Celsius. Do not bother with any summer stuff like buckwheat or sorghum Sudan grass. Those will not pop up until the soil warms up. Grains like rye and wheat can work too, but ideally you would get those beneath the soil like you would with the peas for the same reason. I mean, birds would be super pumped if you would just throw a bunch of wheat right on the surface right now. That they would really thank you for that. So if the soil is able to be sown into with a seeder, i.e. it's just not just like a muddy surface, but like maybe like a light compost mulch or dry enough to lightly rake and work the top 2 inches or so, a combo of grains and legumes like that can be a great late winter option. Of course, if you're wanting to plant soon, then maybe covering that area with mulch or a tarp is more practical. It's like a safer approach at least. Anyway, I hope that is all at least a little bit helpful if you're wondering what you can be sowing right now. Let me know your thoughts and questions, as always, on anything I talk about. It's Friday, so that doesn't really mean a whole lot, but it does mean that I'm about to nerd out all weekend on whatever it is that I'm interested in, and then I'll probably spend all week next week telling you about it. Also, our Brighton and Hove Albion Seagulls have a big match on Saturdays, so, get your Seagull costumes on. The UK game is on a biggie as well, but it's at 9 p.m., so I will be calmly watching that replay on Sunday morning. And I don't know if you've ever watched a tense basketball match while drinking coffee, but I'm pretty sure I've identified that as how I will one day leave this world. Yeah, just saying. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music you are hearing here. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of January, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Carolina Gray or Carolina? Carlina. I don't even think there's an A in there. It's just Carlina Gray. Carlina. A lot of options here. So Carlina Gray and William Hoogstraten. William Hoogstraten. Yeah, I think I got both those immaculately. Anyway, this is the story of a couple paleontologists who hear about some archaeologists were digging around in the dinosaur freeway, presumably looking to discover a new species of dinosaur. And so these paleontologists secretly plant a couple fake dinosaurs at each of the respective dig sites for these archaeologists to sort of teach them a lesson. It's one of those stories that if you think about it too hard, you will see all the flaws, but it's a fun ride and the paleontologists get a good chuckle out of it. So yeah. Anyway, have a great weekend, you all. I will see you on Monday. bright and early at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, you all.